A young girl was born without arms, yet every morning she would venture out, a small bag tied around her neck, offering candies and kind words to passers-by. But when she was humiliated right there on the sidewalk, a black car pulled up. From the vehicle emerged one of the wealthiest men in the country who, without hesitation, said to the aggressors, "You just laid a hand on the only damn thing I have left that's sacred." What followed would forever change the destinies of these two lonely hearts. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories delivered daily. The millionaire gazed at the city through the panoramic window of his penthouse office. Far below, people looked like insignificant ants scurrying about in a pointless frenzy. Straightening the cuffs of his Italian silk shirt, he glanced at the platinum watch on his wrist, a gift from an Arab sheikh after closing a billion-dollar deal. It was exactly 9 o'clock. Punctuality was one of his obsessions. "The quarterly reports," his assistant announced, placing a leather binder on the black marble desk. He didn't even look up. He simply nodded curtly, dismissing her. Alone again, he sighed. The tech empire he'd built over 20 years consumed everything. His time, his energy, even his ability to feel anything beyond the cold satisfaction of seeing the numbers grow in the financial spreadsheets. The mansion where he lived, with its 17 rooms, infinity pool, and artwork valued in the millions, remained empty of voices, of laughter. The staff moved like shadows, trained to be invisible. The women who occasionally accompanied him to events were nothing more than temporary accessories, chosen with the same clinical detachment with which he selected the cars in his collection. That morning, as on every other since the accident, he opened the bottom drawer of his desk. A small velvet box lay there, containing a delicate child's bracelet. It was the only thing he kept of the daughter he'd lost 3 years ago. A girl, born with a rare syndrome that affected her movements. A child who, despite everything, smiled as if the world were a magical place. He slammed the drawer shut, as if trying to lock away a painful memory. He picked up the phone and, in a metallic voice, ordered, "Get the car ready. I have a meeting downtown in 30 minutes." Miles away, in a neighborhood where the buildings fought for space as aggressively as its residents fought for opportunities, the girl awoke in her small room at the back of a cramped apartment. Armless since birth, she had developed extraordinary dexterity with her feet. With them, she adjusted the bangs that fell over her lively, expressive eyes. "Are you up already?" Her aunt's voice sounded from the other side of the door. "Breakfast is on the table." The aunt, a woman of quick gestures and permanent dark circles under her eyes, tried to balance 3 jobs to support the niece that life had placed under her responsibility after her sister's abandonment. There was no time for sentimentality or excessive displays of affection. There was only the harshness of everyday life, the struggle for survival. With her skillful feet, the girl dressed, ate her breakfast, and prepared her small bag of goods. Every day, she sold candies and small sweets on the busy streets of the financial district. She didn't do it only out of necessity, although the money was essential. She did it because, paradoxically, it was on the crowded streets that she found a form of belonging, a stage where her silent strength could be seen. "Are you taking the work permit with you?" asked the aunt, already dressed in the uniform of the hospital where she worked the morning cleaning shift. The girl nodded, smiling. Her smile had a luminous quality that contrasted with the harshness of her reality. There was no self-pity in that face, only a serene determination that disconcerted the adults. They left together, each following her path in the daily dance of survival. The girl balancing the bag with its colorful contents, and the aunt carrying the invisible weight of responsibility. The day dawned gray, with a fine mist that promised to turn into rain later, while the millionaire crossed the city in his armored car with the silent driver in front. The girl walked the same streets on foot, stopping at the corners, offering her products with a smile and a kind word for each hurried passerby. Two worlds that seemed destined never to meet, separated, not only by walls of concrete and glass, but by chasms of experience and perspective. Two lonely hearts, one protected by layers of wealth and power, the other exposed to the harshness of life, but strengthened by a resilience that money could not buy. Neither of them could imagine that before the sun set, their solitary orbits would cross, triggering a sequence of events that would shake the foundations of their existences. The meeting downtown had been particularly exhausting. The millionaire massaged his temples as he descended in the private elevator. Hostile takeovers always drained his energy, even when they ended in his favor, as had been the case. The biotech company he had just incorporated into his conglomerate represented another step towards the monopoly he had been meticulously building. "Where to now, sir?" asked the driver as he slid into the back seat of the black sedan. "Take a drive through downtown before we head back. I need to think." The car moved smoothly through the congested traffic. Through the tinted windows, the millionaire observed the city without really seeing it. His mind was occupied with spreadsheets, projections, and market strategies, until something unusual caught his attention. A small crowd was forming on the sidewalk. Teenagers laughing loudly, people hurrying past, some casting curious glances, but continuing on their way. In the center of this human swirl, something was happening. A strange feeling, something he hadn't experienced in a long time, pricked his conscience. Curiosity. "Pull over," he ordered abruptly. The driver, accustomed to the brusque commands, parked smoothly by the curb. The millionaire lowered the window a few inches, just enough to hear the voices and laughter. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 teenagers surrounded a small figure on the ground. A girl. Her candies were scattered on the dirty concrete of the sidewalk. They mimicked her awkward movements, pretending not to have arms, laughing without disguising their youthful mockery. "Look at the freak trying to pick things up with her feet. How do you brush your teeth, you little monster? I bet nobody ever gave you a real hug, huh?" The cruel words ricocheted through the air like stray bullets. The girl remained silent, her eyes downcast, trying to gather her wares with her skillful feet. Her dignity was palpable, a stark contrast to the pettiness of her tormentors. Something snapped inside the millionaire. A floodgate that had been holding back emotions he'd thought dead for 3 years. Without thinking twice, he opened the car door. "Wait here," he instructed the driver, who nodded with an impassive expression. His impeccable suit, the handmade Italian shoes, and the commanding posture created an aura of power that made the passers-by instinctively make way. He approached the group, his determined steps echoing on the asphalt. The teenagers noticed his presence when the tall shadow fell over them. There was a moment of hesitation, that instinctive pause of predators when they encounter a stronger rival. The millionaire said nothing initially. He just looked at each of them, a cold, calculating gaze that made the arrogant smiles wither on their young faces. Then he turned to the girl. She had managed to sit up, her legs crossed in a lotus position, her feet methodically picking up each candy, each sweet. She wasn't crying. There was no self-pity in her concentrated expression, just a silent dignity that inexplicably reminded him of his lost daughter. He turned back to the teenagers and, in a low voice, but cutting like an ice pick, said, "You just laid a hand on the only damn thing I have left that's sacred." The phrase, enigmatic and loaded with contained emotion, made the aggressors recoil. One of them, the tallest, tried to put on a defiant attitude. "And who the hell are you to—" The millionaire didn't let him finish. He pulled his phone from the inside pocket of his jacket and, without taking his eyes off the youths, speed-dialed a number. "I need full identification on 3 individuals," he said to whoever was on the other end of the line. He described them with clinical precision. I want family history, school records, and any infractions, no matter how small, on my desk in an hour. The teenagers paled. They didn't know who this man was, but they recognized power when they saw it. And this stranger in the expensive suit exuded power like a venomous snake exudes danger. "It was just a joke, man," muttered one of them, already backing away. The millionaire ignored them as if they had ceased to exist in his universe. He turned to the girl who was now watching him with wide eyes, not of fear, he noted, with surprise, but of curiosity. On an impulse that even he didn't understand, he crouched down beside her. His perfectly tailored pants touched the dirty concrete, something unthinkable in any other context. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice suddenly softer. The girl nodded. Then, to the millionaire's amazement, she smiled. A smile without reservations, without ulterior motives, without the social calculation that accompanied every interaction. In his world of business and power. "Thank you," she replied. "But you didn't need to scare the boys so much. They're just confused kids." The compassion in that phrase hit the millionaire like a punch to the gut. How many times had his own daughter forgiven the offenses of other children, while he, the father, plotted revenge? Without thinking much, he reached out to help her up, but he stopped the gesture in mid-air, embarrassed by his own stupidity. The girl noticed and laughed, a crystalline laugh without malice. "Don't worry," she said, rising with impressive grace, using her feet to propel her body until she was upright. "I'm used to doing things my way." The millionaire felt something, strange stir in his chest, a feeling dormant for so long that he hardly recognized it. Admiration. "What's your name?" he asked as he leaned over to pick up the girl's bag. She hesitated for a moment, remembering her aunt's warnings about talking to strangers, but there was something in that man's eyes, a familiar sadness, a mutual recognition of pain, that made her answer. "Does it matter?" She replied with a wisdom that transcended her years. "People usually just call me the armless girl anyway." The millionaire felt the words like a cruel mirror of his own existence. To the world, he was just the tycoon, the billionaire, the richest man in the country, labels that replaced his humanity. "Where are you going now?" he asked, surprising himself with a genuine interest. "I'm going to keep selling until the end of the afternoon," she replied practically. "My aunt doesn't get back until 7, and I need to meet my quota for the day." The millionaire looked around. The fine rain that had been threatening all. Morning began to fall, turning the urban landscape into a grey blur. He made an impulsive decision, something so out of his methodical character that it almost made him smile. "Come with me," he said, indicating the car with his head. "I'll give you a ride home." The girl looked at the luxurious vehicle and then at the well-dressed stranger. Any other day, any other child might have refused. But she possessed that rare ability to see beyond appearances. And what she saw in that man wasn't a threat, but a loneliness that mirrored her own. "Okay," she replied simply, "but I have to be home before 7. My aunt worries." When the driver, with an impassive expression, opened the door for them to enter, neither of them could predict that simple gesture, getting into a luxury car on a rainy afternoon, would initiate a journey that transcended charity, compassion, or any other conventional feeling. It was the beginning of a redemption that neither of them knew they needed. The ride in the luxurious car was done in a silence full of unexpressed meanings. The millionaire, always so confident in the realm of business, felt strangely out of place next to that small figure who watched the city through the window with curious eyes. The girl, in turn, seemed perfectly at ease, as if riding in armored cars with strange millionaires was part of her routine. "Where do you live?" he asked finally. The girl pointed to a peripheral neighborhood, giving precise instructions with The naturalness of someone who knows every corner, every shortcut. The driver nodded discreetly in the rearview mirror, adjusting the route. As they progressed, the urban landscape was transformed. The mirrored skyscrapers gave way to modest buildings, then to housing projects, until they reached an area of simple houses and vibrant local commerce, despite the rain that was now falling harder. "It's here," she said, when they stopped in front of a small building of exposed bricks, with makeshift pots on the windows, trying to add color to the worn facade. The millionaire gazed out the window, feeling a discomfort he couldn't quite name. It wasn't disdain. He was past the point of judging people by the look of their homes. It was something more complex, a stark realization of the disparity between his world and hers. "Thanks for the ride," the girl said, deftly maneuvering to open the door with her feet. "That was really nice of you." "Wait," he said abruptly. "Let me walk you in." She looked at him curiously. "You don't have to. My aunt's not home and I can take care of myself." "I'm sure you can, but—" He hesitated, unable to articulate the turmoil of emotions surging through him. "I'd like to see where you live." The girl shrugged with a fluid motion that compensated for the absence of her arms. "Suit yourself." They got out of the car together. The driver, instructed to wait, nodded with the impassivity of someone who had witnessed his boss's most eccentric behaviors. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up. There was no elevator. The girl ascended the worn stairs with the agility of someone who traveled that path several times a day. The millionaire followed close behind, watching with a mixture of admiration and anguish how she used her feet to balance herself and propel her body upward. The interior of the apartment was as small as he had imagined, but impeccably clean and organized. Simple furniture, some clearly adapted to facilitate the girl's life. On the walls, instead of expensive paintings or artwork, were colorful drawings done with her feet. He recognized her unmistakable style. "Do you live here alone with your aunt?" he asked, feeling strangely out of place in his expensive suit. "In that modest space?" "Yeah, my mum left when I was a baby," she replied with a disconcerting frankness as she placed her bag on the table with a precise movement of her feet. "I guess she didn't know how to take care of a kid like me." The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. He remembered his own wife, who couldn't handle the stress of having a daughter with special needs and had chosen to leave their lives, plunging into a self-destructive spiral of parties and shallow relationships. "And your father?" he asked, immediately realizing the insensitivity of the question. "Never met him," she replied simply, without self-pity. "My aunt says he didn't know I existed. Sometimes I like to imagine that if he did, he would have stayed." The silence that followed was charged with unspoken emotions. The millionaire looked around, absorbing every detail of that life so different from his own. On a shelf, he noticed, a row of small makeshift trophies, medals hanging on colorful ribbons. "You compete in something?" he asked, indicating the objects. Her face lit up. "Adaptive swimming. The community center has classes twice a week." She paused, suddenly shy. "I'm good at it. In the water, I feel like I have wings instead of arms." The mental image of that small creature gliding freely through the water struck the millionaire with unexpected force. His own daughter loved to swim. It was in the aquatic environment that her physical limitations seemed momentarily suspended. "Would you like to swim in an Olympic-sized pool?" he asked impulsively. "I have one at my house. It's heated and has state-of-the-art equipment." As soon as the words left his mouth, an internal alarm went off. What was he doing? Inviting a strange child to his home, getting involved in the life of someone he had just met. It went against all his carefully established protocols, all the barriers he had erected between himself and the world after the tragedy. The girl seemed to sense his sudden hesitation. "That would be cool," she replied cautiously, "but my aunt wouldn't let me go to a stranger's house, even if he helped me out today." The millionaire felt a contradictory mixture of relief and disappointment. She was right, of course. What madness had taken hold of him? "Of course, I completely understand," he said, readopting his formal tone. He took a card from his inside jacket pocket and placed it on the table. "But if you ever need help, you can get in touch." The girl looked at the card curiously but didn't touch it. "Thanks. Want some juice before you go? I can make some. I'm good at it." The millionaire was about to politely refuse when his phone vibrated. It was the COO of his company. "Urgent," the message said, something about the acquisition he had just finalized. "I need to go," he said, suddenly relieved to have an excuse to escape that emotionally uncomfortable situation. "Thanks for the offer." When he went out to the street, the rain had stopped. The car was still waiting for him, a dark and silent presence. He got in quickly, feeling strangely disoriented, as if waking from a dream. "To the office," he instructed the driver, who obeyed without question. As the vehicle glided back to the financial district, the millionaire tried to reorganize his thoughts. What had just happened? Why had he felt so drawn to the fate of that specific child? There were thousands of children in need in the city. He already donated substantial sums to charities, fulfilling his quota of social responsibility without ever getting personally involved. But there was something about that girl, her quiet dignity, her acceptance without self-pity, her ability to find joy despite her limitations, that struck him on a visceral level. "No," he muttered to himself, "this is crazy." He leaned back in the leather seat and closed his eyes. He needed to focus on business, on the empire he had built, on the responsibilities he had to shareholders and employees. He couldn't afford emotional distractions. The image of the girl, however, refused to leave his mind. And for the first time in 3 years, the wound opened by his daughter's death throbbed with a sharp, fresh pain. In the small apartment, the girl watched the card on the table. She didn't need to pick it up to know that it belonged to someone important. She had recognized the man. She had seen him on magazine covers at the corner newsstand, on news reports on the small television at the community center. She knew who he was, one of the most powerful men in the country. What she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was the whirlwind of emotions she had unleashed in that long, dormant heart, and how that chance encounter on a busy sidewalk marked the beginning of a transformation that neither of them was prepared to face. 3 days passed without the millionaire being able to erase the image of the girl from his thoughts. During important meetings, multi-million-dollar negotiations, dinners with influential politicians, there she was, like a silent presence, watching him with those eyes that were too wise for her age. "Are you all right?" his assistant asked after he lost his train of thought for the 3rd time during a video conference with international investors. "Perfectly," he replied curtly, though he knew it wasn't true. On the 3rd day, sitting in his private office on the penthouse floor, he made an impulsive decision. He asked the security department to locate the girl's aunt's address and run a full background check. In less than 2 hours, he had a complete dossier, hard-working woman, no addictions, holding down 3 jobs to support her niece after her sister's abandonment, clean record. The girl attended public school, had good grades despite the obvious difficulties, participated in an adaptive swimming program, and had never been in trouble. He looked at the phone on his desk, hesitant. What would he say? How would he explain his sudden interest in that particular child? Any approach would seem suspicious, inappropriate, or just plain bizarre coming from a man in his position. He was about to give up on the idea when his gaze fell on a news item on his computer screen. Children's Rehabilitation Center facing closure due to lack of funding. He clicked on the link. It was a small institution dedicated to children with physical disabilities, offering therapies, adaptive education, and sports activities. Among the promotional photos, he recognized the place where the girl had said she practiced swimming. An idea began to form in his mind, a way to help her indirectly, without appearing intrusive or inappropriate. He picked up the phone and dialed his lawyer's number. "I want to make a substantial donation to this institution," he announced without preamble when the man answered, "Anonymous for now, and I want detailed information about the adaptive swimming program they offer." Hours later, the millionaire parked his car, driving himself, a rare occurrence, a few blocks from the community center. He wore understated clothes, so different from his usual bespoke suits. He wanted to observe without being noticed, to understand how the program worked before getting officially involved. From the makeshift bleachers, he watched the adaptive swimming lesson. There were about 10 children in the modest pool, all with different types of physical disabilities. The instructors were patient and dedicated, despite the visibly worn equipment and the dilapidated facilities. Then he saw her. The girl entered the pool area, walking with that peculiar grace she had developed. Without ceremony, she sat on the edge and slid into the water with a fluid motion. And then something magical happened. In the water, she transformed. Without the constraint of gravity, her body found a freedom that solid ground denied. She moved with the elegance of a mermaid, using her legs and feet with impressive coordination. Her expression was one of pure joy, of liberation. The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. For a fleeting instant, he superimposed the image of his daughter onto that scene. How she would have loved to be there, swimming with other children, who understood her limitations, who didn't judge her, who celebrated every small accomplishment. At the end of the lesson, he remained seated, watching as the children left the pool. The girl was one of the last to leave. With impressive resourcefulness, she used her feet to dry herself and put on a loose t-shirt. She was about to leave when her gaze met the millionaire's in the bleachers. There was a moment of mutual recognition, followed by a spontaneous smile from her. Without hesitation, she walked towards him. "Did you come to watch me swim?" She asked directly, without the social awkwardness that usually permeates adult-child interactions. The millionaire, caught off guard, felt strangely vulnerable in the face of that disarming frankness. "Actually," he replied cautiously, "I came to check out this center. I'm considering making a donation." Her eyes lit up. "That would be amazing. The pool is always cold because the heater broke, and we don't have good equipment like the other centers in the city." Her honesty, devoid of manipulation or flattery, was refreshing. The millionaire, used to people who measured every word in his presence, suddenly felt at ease. "I noticed that you swim very well," he commented. She shrugged in that characteristic way of hers. "In the water, I don't miss my arms. It's like my body knows exactly what to do." "I understand that feeling," he said, surprised by his own sincerity. "My daughter used to say something similar." The words escaped before he could contain them. He never talked about his daughter, not even with close friends. The subject was a self-imposed taboo, a wound that he didn't allow anyone to touch. "You have a daughter?" the girl asked, sitting down next to him on the bleachers with naturalness, as if they were old friends. The millionaire hesitated. The correct answer would be had, but he couldn't pronounce the word. "She used to swim too," he replied finally, his voice slightly choked. "She loved the water." The girl observed his face for a moment with a perception that went beyond her age. "Where is she now?" The question, so direct and innocent, hit him like a physical blow. In his world, no one would dare to approach the subject so bluntly. "She's no longer with us," he said, surprised by his own honesty. "There was an accident 3 years ago." "I'm sorry," the girl replied, and there was a palpable sincerity in her words. It wasn't the automatic and empty condolence he was used to hearing. After a respectful pause, she added, "She would be proud to see you helping other kids swim." The millionaire felt something warm and wet trickle down his face. With astonishment, he realized they were tears, something he hadn't allowed himself in years. He turned his face away quickly, trying to compose himself. The girl, with surprising sensitivity, pretended not to notice. She began to talk about the upcoming swimming competition, as if she instinctively understood that he needed that moment to regain control. "Are you going to participate?" he asked, grateful for the change of subject. "Yes, but I'm nervous. The other centers have better equipment, professional coaches." She hesitated. "But I'm going to do my best." "I'm sure you will." He looked around at the dilapidated facilities. What if this center had all the resources it needed? State-of-the-art equipment, Olympic coaches, a proper pool. Her eyes widened. That would be a dream. Not just for me, but for all the kids here. Some can't even come because they would need special equipment that we don't have. Something solidified inside the millionaire. A decision that had been forming since the encounter on the sidewalk took definite shape. "I'm going to make it happen," he said, more to himself than to her. "Really?" Her face lit up with genuine hope. "Yes, this center is going to have everything it needs." At that moment, the program coordinator approached, clearly intrigued by the presence of that well-dressed stranger talking to one of his students. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked politely, but with an underlying protective tone. The millionaire stood up, extending his hand. "Actually, I believe I can help you. I'd like to make a substantial donation to this center." The coordinator's eyes widened when he recognized him. Even dressed in a discreet manner, the millionaire had a nationally known face. That would be an honor," he stammered. "Our children would certainly benefit enormously." "I have some specific ideas about improvements," continued the millionaire, his tone now professional, "mainly related to the swimming program. Can we discuss them in your office?" As the two adults walked away, the millionaire looked back. The girl was still sitting on the bleachers, watching him with an expression that mixed surprise and something deeper, a kind of recognition, as if she could see beyond the facade of power and wealth to the wounded man who existed behind it. For the first time in years, the millionaire felt an emotion he thought had been extinguished in his heart. Hope. Not for the promise of more wealth or power, but for the possibility of doing something genuinely meaningful, something that perhaps could begin to fill the void left by his daughter's absence. 2 weeks later, the community center was buzzing with activity. Construction workers were working on expanding the pool, installing state-of-the-art equipment. Adaptive swimming specialists recruited from various countries offered workshops for the local instructors. The news of the generous donation, the exact amount of which was the subject of speculation, spread quickly throughout the city. The millionaire followed everything closely, dedicating precious hours from his busy schedule to personally supervise every detail of the renovation. His executives noticed the change. He, who delegated even the simplest decisions to focus only on the strategic ones, was now involved in issues as trivial as the ideal water temperature of the pool or the type of non-slip material for the floor. "You seem different," his assistant commented during a rare break between meetings. More what?" he asked, looking up from the center's blueprints he was reviewing. "Alive," she replied simply, then blushed at her own audacity. Instead of getting angry at the personal comment, as he normally would, the millionaire just nodded slightly. He did feel more connected to life than he had in the past 3 years. Each visit to the center, each interaction with the children there, especially with that particular girl, seemed to reconnect him to a part of his humanity that he thought he had lost. That afternoon, a Friday, he cancelled 3 important appointments to attend a special practice. It was the first time the children would use the newly renovated pool with all the new equipment. He arrived discreetly, preferring to observe from the new bleachers installed, more comfortable than the previous ones, but still simple enough not to clash with the community environment. He didn't want to draw attention to himself. The presence of the billionaire benefactor, as the newspapers called him, always caused a stir and distracted the children. But she noticed him immediately. On the other side of the pool, still dressed, the girl nodded with a discreet movement of her head, a small smile on her lips. He returned the gesture, feeling a strange mixture of pride and anticipation. Practice began. The children, clearly excited about the new equipment, were giving their best. The instructors, now trained by elite professionals, were guiding them with more precision and confidence. But the millionaire's eyes mainly followed one silhouette in particular, moving in the water with the fluid grace that had so impressed him the first time. After practice, while the children celebrated their progress, the coordinator approached him. "Your contribution is transforming lives," he said emotionally. "I've never seen these children so motivated, so happy." The millionaire nodded, uncomfortable, with the gratitude. He hadn't done it for recognition or to feel virtuous. He had done it because, well, he couldn't even fully articulate why. "How's she doing?" he asked, discreetly indicating the girl who was now chatting animatedly with other children by the pool. "Extraordinarily well," replied the coordinator. "With the proper equipment and the new methodology, her performance has improved significantly. In fact," he hesitated, as if pondering whether he should continue. "Yes," encouraged the millionaire. "The new coaches believe she has the potential for high-level Paralympic competitions. But that would require an individualized training program, much more intense, with nutritional and psychological support." "Make it happen," interrupted the millionaire without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." The coordinator smiled, already expecting that answer. "In that case, we would need to talk to her aunt. She's the legal guardian and would need to authorize it." The millionaire felt a chill in his stomach. Until that moment, he had kept his involvement relatively anonymous. The girl's aunt probably knew that he was the donor. The news was in all the papers, but they had never met personally. The idea of confronting the woman who took care of the girl awakened an anxiety he hadn't felt since the first big deals of his career. "Of course," he agreed, trying to sound nonchalant. "We can schedule a meeting." At that moment, the girl approached them, her hair still damp from practice. Her expression was radiant. "It was amazing," she exclaimed, with an enthusiasm that made the millionaire smile involuntarily. "The water is at the perfect temperature, and the new instructors taught me techniques I never imagined I could do." "We were just talking about your potential," said the coordinator. "The coaches believe you could compete at a much higher level." Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Really? Like national competitions?" "And international ones eventually," added the millionaire. "If you want to." "I want to." The answer came without hesitation. Then, as if suddenly remembering a less exciting reality, her enthusiasm diminished slightly. "But my aunt, she works so hard. I don't know if she'd have time to take me to more intense training sessions." "That wouldn't be a problem," assured the millionaire. "We could arrange transportation, adjust schedules." "We'd need to talk to her first," the coordinator interjected, giving the millionaire a meaningful look. "Explain the program, the opportunity." "She's going to be at the benefit festival this Sunday," the girl informed them. "It's going to be here at the center to thank you for the donation and show off the new equipment. She took a special day off from work just to come." The millionaire had completely forgotten about the event, even though he had personally approved its organization. The idea of a public space, full of people, cameras, attention, everything he had been avoiding for the past few years, made his stomach clench. But the opportunity to meet the girl's aunt in a neutral context was tempting. "I'll be there," he promised, surprising himself. On Sunday, the center was unrecognizable. Colorful banners decorated the space, music played on the new speakers, and dozens of families circulated among the various attractions. The pool was the center of attention, with demonstrations of the new techniques and adapted equipment. The millionaire arrived discreetly, without an entourage or visible security. He wore simple clothes, though of unmistakable quality. He wanted to go unnoticed, at least for a while, observe before being observed. It didn't take long to locate her. The girl was participating in an exhibition of adaptive synchronized swimming, something that would have been unthinkable before the new equipment. Even from a distance, he could see the joy stamped on her face as she performed the movements in perfect synchrony with the other children. After the presentation, while the audience applauded enthusiastically, her eyes searched the bleachers. She was looking for him, he realized with a wave of unexpected emotion. When she finally located him, her smile widened in a way that made something warm inside the millionaire's chest. It was then that he noticed the woman next to her, shorter than average, with the same skin tone as the girl, dressed simply but with evident care. The aunt. She was talking animatedly with her niece, hugging her shoulders with obvious pride. The program coordinator, who was circulating among the guests, spotted the millionaire and waved discreetly. He approached with a warm smile. "I'm glad you came. Everyone wants to thank our benefactor personally." "I prefer to keep a low profile today," replied the millionaire. Then, indicating with a discreet gesture, "Is that the aunt?" "Yes, an extraordinary woman. She works 3 different jobs to support her niece. Never complains, never asks for help." The coordinator hesitated. "Do you want me to introduce you now?" Before he could answer, the girl spotted them. Without ceremony, she led her aunt towards them, moving with that peculiar grace that always impressed the millionaire. "Aunt, this is the gentleman who helped our center," she introduced naturally, as if she were introducing a schoolmate. "And this," she turned to the millionaire, "is the best aunt in the world." The woman seemed momentarily stunned to recognize the famous billionaire. She blushed slightly but extended her hand with dignity. "It's an honor to meet you, sir. What you've done for these children, there are no words to thank you." The millionaire shook her hand, noting the calluses and marks of hard work. "The honor is mine. Your niece is an extraordinary young woman." The aunt smiled, a tired but genuinely proud smile. "She's my daily inspiration. I've never heard her complain once, despite all the challenges." The conversation flowed with surprising ease. The aunt, having overcome her initial intimidation, revealed herself to be an intelligent and articulate woman. They talked about the girl, about her swimming abilities, about the new training program. "The coaches think she has Olympic potential," explained the millionaire. "But that would require a greater commitment, more frequent training." He saw the shadow of concern cross the woman's face. "I'd love to support her in that, but with my work schedule—" "We could work that out," he offered. "Arrange transportation. Adjust the schedules to your schedule." The aunt hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of accepting so much help. "It's very generous, but I wouldn't want to take advantage of your kindness. You've already done so much for everyone here." "It's not taking advantage when it's offered freely," he replied, with a sincerity that surprised himself. "Your niece has a special gift. It would be a shame not to develop it fully." The girl, who had been following the conversation in attentive silence, intervened. "Please, aunt. It's what I've always dreamed of." Something softened in the woman's countenance. "Let's talk about it at home, dear." Turning to the millionaire, "I need to think about it. It's always been just the 2 of us, making our way independently." The millionaire respected her caution. In fact, he admired her for it. In his world, most people accepted any offer of his without question, eager to please, to gain advantages. "I completely understand. There's no rush to decide." At that moment, a center employee approached, informing them that the official thank you speech would begin soon, and that they expected the millionaire to say a few words. The idea of speaking in public, something he had avoided since the accident, triggered a wave of anxiety. He was about to refuse when the girl looked at him with those intense eyes, full of a confidence that he wasn't sure he deserved. "It's going to be amazing," she said simply. And somehow, those 4 words dissipated his fear. He nodded to the employee, who walked away visibly relieved. "I've never been much for the spotlight," he confessed to the aunt, who smiled understandingly. "She has that effect on people," she replied, indicating her niece with a caring gesture. "Makes us want to be better than we think we can be." Those simple words perfectly captured what the millionaire had been feeling in recent weeks. That child, with her serene resilience and genuine joy, had awakened something in him that he thought was dead. The ability to care, to connect, to see beyond his own pain. As he headed towards the small makeshift stage, he felt a growing certainty within him. The encounter on the sidewalk, which could have been just a moment of passing charity, was transforming into something much deeper. And for the first time since the loss of his daughter, he allowed himself to glimpse the possibility of a future that wasn't defined exclusively by absence and pain. A future where, perhaps, there would be room for new ties, new connections, new hope. The intensive training program began the following week. The girl's aunt, after much deliberation, had accepted the proposal with one condition: that her niece maintain a normal school routine and that the training not compromise her social development. The millionaire not only agreed, but admired the woman's genuine concern for the child's overall well-being. The arrangement worked surprisingly well. A driver picked up the girl after school 3 times a week and took her to the center, now equipped with state-of-the-art technology. On weekends, when the aunt could accompany her, there were extra training sessions, followed by relaxed lunches to which, increasingly frequently, the millionaire joined them. For someone whose meals usually took place in Michelin-starred restaurants or tense boardrooms, those simple lunches in diners near the center represented a surprising discovery. The conversation flowed without the hidden agendas or power plays that dominated his corporate world. The girl talked about her achievements in swimming, her friends from school, her dreams for the future. The aunt, initially reserved, gradually opened up, revealing a sharp sense of humor and a practical wisdom that the millionaire came to value. After one of those lunches, while the girl was trying out a new flotation device, he and the aunt watched from the edge of the pool. "She's improved so much in the past few weeks," he commented. "The coaches are impressed." The aunt nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "I've never seen her so motivated, so happy." There was a moment of comfortable silence between them, something rare in the millionaire's life, accustomed to filling every second with productivity. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said finally, surprising himself with the boldness. She turned to face him, a shadow of caution in her eyes. "Sure. Why did you take her in? After your sister left?" It couldn't have been an easy decision. The question hung between them for a moment. The millionaire almost regretted asking it. It was too intimate, possibly painful. But the aunt just smiled, a serene smile that spoke of peace with difficult decisions. "It wasn't a matter of decision," she replied simply. "It was a matter of love. When I saw her for the first time in the hospital, so small, so helpless, I knew immediately that I would do anything for her." The millionaire nodded, understanding on a deep level. It was as if he had felt something similar on that sidewalk months ago. "My sister couldn't handle the challenge," continued the aunt, her tone free of judgment. "Some people just don't have that strength. She left a letter and disappeared when the baby was only 3 months old." "And the father?" asked the millionaire, curiosity overcoming his usual detachment. The aunt's expression closed off slightly. She never said who he was. A married man, from what I understood. Someone powerful, influential. He didn't want to get involved when he found out about the pregnancy and especially when he found out about the girl's condition. A heavy silence followed those words. The millionaire felt a wave of anger at the anonymous man who had abandoned his responsibility, who hadn't known the incredible child he had helped bring into the world. "He doesn't know what he missed," he said finally, his voice charged with contained emotion. The aunt looked at him with unexpected intensity. "No, he doesn't, but maybe he can still find out one day." There was something in her tone, a suggestion of deeper meaning that made him momentarily uncomfortable. Before he could explore the matter further, however, the girl came out of the pool and came towards them, radiant after the training session. The following week, the millionaire faced a corporate crisis. A hostile takeover attempt of one of his subsidiaries demanded his full attention. For the first time in months, he cancelled his weekly visit to the center. At the height of the tense negotiations, in his office on the penthouse floor, surrounded by lawyers and executives, his personal phone vibrated. It was a message from the aunt, a short video of the girl performing for the first time a particularly complex maneuver in the water. At the end of the video, she looked directly at the camera and said, "I did it. I wish you were here to see." Something clenched in the millionaire's chest. For a fleeting instant, the room full of men in suits, the spreadsheets, the legal documents. Everything seemed absurdly unimportant. "Let's take a 30-minute break," he announced abruptly, standing up. The executives exchanged confused looks. He never interrupted meetings, but no one dared to question him. On the private terrace, he breathed in the afternoon air, his mind in turmoil. What was happening to him? How had a child he had met only a few months ago managed to infiltrate so deeply into his life, into his thoughts? The answer came in a flash of clarity. She had reminded him that there was more to life than financial statements and corporate dominance. She had made him feel again joy, worry, hope. The next morning, as soon as the crisis was under control, he headed to the center. He found the girl in the physical therapy room, working on specific exercises to strengthen her leg muscles. "You came," she exclaimed when she saw him, her face lighting up. "I saw your video. Impressive," he replied, genuinely proud. "I'm sorry I missed the moment." She shrugged without resentment. "There's the next one. I'm going to try something even harder at the state competition." The millionaire sat down on a nearby stool, watching her as the physical therapist guided the exercises. There was something so special about that child, her resilience, her uncomplicated joy, her ability to live fully in the present. "There's something I want to ask you," she said during a break in the exercise. "Can I?" "Sure," he replied, intrigued by her sudden seriousness. "Why do you help us so much? Me, the center, all these kids?" The question, so direct and unexpected, caught him off guard. Any other adult would have considered the question ungrateful or impertinent, but he recognized the genuine curiosity behind it. "Because," he began, and then realized that he didn't have a simple answer. "Because you remind me of someone, and because you make me feel that I can do something really important with my resources." She nodded, as if the answer made perfect sense. "Your daughter, right? I remind you of her." It wasn't a question. The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. "Yes. My aunt says that sometimes people come into our lives at the exact moment we need them," continued the girl, her voice surprisingly mature. "Maybe you came into my life because I needed help, and maybe I came into yours because you needed—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Of what?" he prompted, genuinely interested in her perspective. "Of purpose," she concluded. "Something besides making money and doing deals." The simplicity and depth of the observation left him momentarily speechless. How could a child see so clearly what he had taken years to understand? At that moment, the aunt entered the room. She seemed tense, worried. When she saw the millionaire, her face took on an even more complex expression. "Can we talk?" she asked, indicating the hallway. "In private." Intrigued by her seriousness, the millionaire followed her out of the room. In the empty hallway, she seemed nervous, almost hesitant, an unusual posture for that normally so confident woman. "There's something important I need to tell you," she began, her voice low as if afraid of being overheard. "Something about her mother. My sister." The millionaire felt a pang of apprehension. "What is it? Has she come back? Does she want custody of the girl back?" The aunt shook her head. "No, nothing like that. In fact, I've only heard from her twice since she left. The last time was 5 years ago from somewhere in Europe." "Then, what is it?" She took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into dangerous waters. "My sister worked as a receptionist at an up-and-coming tech company about 12 years ago, a promising startup that later became an empire." She paused meaningfully. "Your company?" The millionaire frowned, trying to grasp the implication. "Your sister worked for me. I don't remember." "You probably wouldn't have noticed her. She was just a receptionist in the main lobby. But she noticed you. She was young, impressionable, and you were the charismatic founder, the rising genius." A cold sensation began to form in the millionaire's stomach. "What exactly are you suggesting?" The aunt stared at him directly, her eyes firm despite the tremor in her voice. "There was a holiday party. My sister stayed late. So did you. She always said it was consensual, a moment of connection. But when she found out she was pregnant and tried to talk to you, she couldn't get past your assistance. So she sent a letter explaining the situation. The world seemed to spin in slow motion. Flashes of memory invaded the millionaire's mind. A Christmas party, too much champagne, an attractive young woman, a brief encounter in his office after everyone left. Something that he, in his youthful arrogance, had completely forgotten. The next day, "After the baby was born," continued the aunt, relentless in her narrative, "and the doctors diagnosed her condition, my sister tried again. She was desperate, alone, scared. She sent another letter, this time with pictures of the newborn." The millionaire felt as if the ground disappeared beneath his feet. "I never received any letters," he murmured, but even as he said it, a doubt formed. Back then, his staff rigorously filtered his correspondence, protecting him from obsessed fans, scammers, opportunists. How many genuine communications would have been discarded as attempted extortion? "The girl is your daughter," concluded the aunt, her voice almost a whisper. "I have documents, my sister's testimony, even a diary she kept at that time. I never intended to use this against you or seek any kind of compensation. We created our life, independent, but now—" She hesitated, her expression conflicted. "Now that you've entered her life, that you clearly care about her, I thought you deserved to know the truth." The millionaire remained silent for a long moment, absorbing the impact of that revelation. The pieces fit together with a painful clarity. The instant connection he had felt with the girl, the inexplicable familiarity in her smile, the way her expression sometimes mirrored his own. "Why tell me this now?" he asked finally, his voice hoarse. "Because she's getting attached to you," replied the aunt with sincerity, "and you to her. If this continues, she deserves to know who you really are, and you deserve the chance to decide what role you want to have in her life." Through the half-open door of the physical therapy room, the millionaire could see the girl, his daughter, concentrated on her exercises, her face determined, her willpower evident in every movement. An overwhelming emotion flooded his chest, a mixture of guilt, regret, fear, and above all, a love so intense that it physically hurt. "I need some time," he said, stepping back, "to process all this." The aunt nodded, understanding. All I ask is that whatever your decision, consider what's best for her. She's faced enough abandonment in her life already. The millionaire left the center in a state of shock, his mind filled with fragmented images. The girl on the sidewalk, surrounded by aggressors, the girl in the pool, moving with supernatural grace, the girl smiling at him over a plate of fries at a simple diner, his daughter, all this time helping a child who unknowingly carried his own blood. In the days that followed, he plunged into a frenzied investigation. He hired detectives to locate the girl's mother, ordered his lawyers to unearth any archived correspondence from the time mentioned, discreetly submitted to a DNA test using a hairbrush that the girl had left in the car after a training session. The confirmation came a week later, 99.9% probability of paternity. There was no longer any way to deny it. The child with whom fate had reconnected him by chance on a busy sidewalk was his own biological daughter. The news landed like a bomb in the tabloids. Someone from inside the lab, where the DNA test had been processed, leaked the information, and in a matter of hours, sensational headlines dominated all media outlets. Tech tycoon discovers girl he was helping is his biological daughter. Billionaire had secret daughter with disability. Scandal. Unexpected heiress could change succession of tech empire. The millionaire, isolated in his mansion, watched the media frenzy with a mixture of anger and despair. His phones didn't stop ringing. Lawyers, press advisors, corporate consultants, all demanded instructions on how to proceed in the face of the scandal. The only call he answered was from the aunt. "We're surrounded by reporters," she said, her voice trembling with concern. "We can't even leave the house." She's confused, scared. "I'm sending security immediately," he promised. "And I'm going to fix this, I swear." But the situation only worsened. The next morning, the chairman of his company's board called an emergency meeting. The news had affected the stock value, created instability among investors. There were concerns about emotional decisions that could compromise the company, comments about how he had hidden the existence of a daughter for all these years. "We need an official statement denying any relationship with this child," insisted the head of communications. "We can suggest it's an attempt at extortion, a conspiracy to destabilize the company." The millionaire, who once would have coldly considered such a strategy, felt a wave of revulsion so intense that he had to restrain himself from physically assaulting the man. "She is my daughter," he declared, his voice dangerously low. "The test confirms it, and I'm not going to deny her to save our stock price." The room fell into stunned silence. No one dared to contradict him directly, but the looks exchanged spoke volumes. His largest individual shareholder, an older man who had been his mentor in the early years, was the only one to speak up. "I'm afraid we need to consider a temporary leave of absence from the CEO position while you deal with this personal situation." It wasn't a request, it was an ultimatum. The board had already organized, he realized. They were prepared to force him out if he didn't cooperate. After the meeting, completely exhausted, the millionaire finally answered. The call from his ex-wife, the mother of his deceased daughter. "Is it true?" she asked without preamble. "You have another daughter?" "Yes," he replied simply. A heavy silence settled between them. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked finally. Her voice choked. "I didn't know," he replied with sincerity. "I swear I didn't know." Another long silence, and then, "I'd like to meet her." The statement caught him off guard. "Really?" "She's our daughter's sister," replied the ex-wife, her voice soft. "Part of the family we formed, even if we're separated now." That conversation, strangely, brought him the first moment of peace since the revelation. Amid the chaos, the scandal, the corporate betrayal, there was at least one person who understood what really mattered. That night, he made a decision. He instructed his lawyers to prepare his temporary resignation from the company presidency. He instructed his financial department to create a substantial trust fund to ensure the girl's future, regardless of what happened to his shares or his personal fortune. And then he did the only thing that seemed to make sense. He went to the small apartment where his daughter and the aunt were practically prisoners due to the press harassment. The building was surrounded by photographers and reporters. His car barely managed to get through. When he finally reached the apartment door, escorted by security guards, he felt like he was going to the most important meeting of his life. The aunt opened the door, her face marked by fatigue and worry. "She just fell asleep," she informed him in a low voice. "Today was difficult." They entered the small living room, now crowded with flower arrangements sent by strangers, cards, even offers of interviews and contracts to tell the exclusive story. "How is she handling all this?" he asked, his voice laden with guilt. The aunt sighed. "She's confused, scared of all the attention, and with a lot of questions." She paused. "Questions that only you can answer." The millionaire nodded. "I'll answer them all, but first we need to get you out of here. It's not safe. It's not healthy for her." "Where to?" "My beach house. It's isolated, safe, has more than enough space until the storm blows over." The aunt hesitated, clearly in conflict. "I don't want her to think we're running away, or worse, that there's something wrong with her, something she should hide." "It's not a matter of hiding," he argued. "It's about giving her space to understand what's happening, without cameras and microphones invading every moment." Before they could continue the discussion, a small figure appeared in the bedroom doorway. The girl, dressed in simple pajamas, her hair tousled, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "You came," she said simply. The millionaire felt his heart race. Seeing her now with the new knowledge, every feature of her face seemed to scream the obvious truth that he hadn't noticed before. That eye shape, the determined chin, they were his, reflected in that small face. "Of course I came," he replied, his voice soft. "We need to talk." The aunt made a move to withdraw to give them privacy, but the girl stretched out her foot, catching the hem of her clothes with her toes in a gesture that asked her to stay. The woman nodded, sitting down next to her niece. "Is it true?" asked the girl bluntly. "Are you my father?" The directness of the question was so characteristic of her that, despite the gravity of the moment, the millionaire almost smiled. "Yes," he replied simply, "although I didn't know until recently." "Why didn't you know? Didn't you want to meet me?" The pain in that question was palpable, exposing the fundamental fear that hid behind her usual courage, the fear of having been deliberately rejected. "I never knew you existed," he replied with absolute sincerity. "If I had known, I would have been part of your life from day one." She studied him with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see through any artifice. "You swear?" "I swear on your sister's memory," he replied, realizing only after speaking that it was the first time he had referred to his deceased daughter that way, as the sister of this child he had just met. The girl processed that information for a moment and then asked, "Is that why you helped me that day? Because somehow you knew?" The millionaire shook his head. "I helped because I saw a special child being mistreated. The connection I felt..." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Maybe, on some level, my heart recognized what my mind didn't know yet." She seemed satisfied with that answer. After a moment of reflection, she asked, "What happens now?" It was the question they all faced, and for which there were no simple answers. "For now," replied the millionaire, "we need to find a safe place where we can get to know each other better, away from all this madness. After that, well, that's something we need to decide together, all of us." He looked at the aunt explicitly. including her in that newly formed unit. The message was clear. He had no intention of separating the girl from the woman who had raised her with so much love. The girl nodded, considering the proposal. Then, with the wisdom that continued to surprise him, she said, "People are saying bad things about you because of me." "Not because of you," he corrected firmly. "Don't ever think that. It's because of choices adults made long before you were born. None of this is your fault." "Your company," she began, clearly having overheard snippets of news about the corporate crisis unfolding. "My company will survive," he interrupted with a sad smile. "And if it doesn't, I'll build another one. Companies can be replaced. You can't." Those simple words, spoken with such conviction, seemed to finally ease the girl's worries. Her shoulders visibly relaxed. "Can we take my swim trophies?" she asked, her practical mind already turning to the logistics of the proposed move. The millionaire felt a wave of relief so intense he almost laughed. "We can take everything you want." That same night, as the city slept, a discreet convoy of cars left the small apartment building through the back exit. A few hours later, the girl, the aunt, and the millionaire arrived at the secluded beachfront property. While the aunt helped the girl settle into one of the spacious bedrooms, the millionaire stood on the deck, gazing at the ocean stretching endlessly under the starlit sky. His phone had been ringing incessantly during the drive. Lawyers, executives, reporters. He'd silenced it, focusing only on the present moment. As much as he tried, he couldn't regret the turn his life had taken. The corporate empire he'd built with so much sacrifice now seemed insubstantial compared to the chance to know his daughter, to be a part of her life. "She's finally asleep," the aunt announced, joining him on the deck. "She's an amazing kid, always has been." "Thanks to you," he replied sincerely. "Everything she is, she owes to you." The aunt smiled, melancholic. "Maybe, but there are traits of hers that always reminded me of someone else. Now I know who." They stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the uncertain future that lay before them. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more storms to weather, more challenges, more public scrutiny. But for the first time in a long time, the millionaire felt something he thought he'd lost forever in the accident that took his other daughter. Hope. Hope for a new family, a new chance, a new purpose. "We'll get through this," he said, more to himself than to the aunt. "For her." The aunt nodded, and together they remained silent, listening to the sound of the waves crashing on the beach, silent witnesses to a new beginning that none of them could have predicted. The first few days at the beach house established a surprisingly domestic pattern. The millionaire, used to delegating every aspect of his personal life, found himself involved in the simplest routines, making breakfast, discussing the days, a menu, even improvising a training area by the property's pool so the girl wouldn't interrupt her training. The decision to temporarily step down from his company's CEO position was met with mixed reactions on Wall Street. The stock, initially, dipped but stabilized when it became clear that the management structure was solid enough to continue operating without his daily presence. "Shouldn't you be working?" the girl asked one morning, finding him in the kitchen preparing fresh squeezed orange juice, something he'd never done before. "I'm on vacation," he replied with a wry smile. "A long, much-needed vacation." She studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond words. "It's because of me. They don't want you there because of me." The millionaire put down the juicer and looked at her directly. "Listen carefully. My stepping aside was my choice, because for the first time in years, I have something more important to do than sit in meetings and sign contracts." "What?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Getting to know my daughter," he answered simply. "Discovering who she is, what she likes, what she dreams about." The girl absorbed those words for a moment, testing them mentally, as she did with all new information. "I like swimming, adventure books, and pistachio ice cream," she offered finally. And I dream of swimming in the Paralympics someday. What about you? The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked about his personal likes, his dreams? Not as the billionaire CEO, but as a person. I like watching the ocean at sunset, he replied after a moment of reflection. Solving complex problems and classical music, although I haven't had much time to listen to it lately. And what do you dream about? She insisted. The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. For an instant, the millionaire found himself confronted with the naked truth of his existence in recent years. A life devoid of personal dreams, focused only on the continued expansion of an empire that in the end couldn't protect him from the deepest pain. I used to dream about success, he answered honestly, about being the best at what I did. He hesitated, unsure if he should mention the tragedy that had changed his life. But something in the girl's attentive gaze encouraged him to continue. After your sister died, I stopped dreaming. I just existed, going through the motions. And now? The question was almost a whisper. Now? A genuine smile formed on his lips. Now I dream about a future where I'm part of your life, where I can watch you grow, become the amazing person I already see in you. The simplicity of that dream, so far removed from the grandiose ambitions that had driven him for decades, surprised him as much as it did the girl. But it was true, the first genuine desire he'd felt in years. The aunt, who'd been watching the scene from the kitchen doorway, cleared her throat softly to announce her presence. The coach called, she informed them. He wants to know when you're coming back to practice. The state meet is less than a month away. Can we go back? The girl asked, hopeful. Is the press still everywhere? The millionaire exchanged a look with the aunt. They'd been following the news online. The initial frenzy had died down a bit, but the story still dominated the tabloids and gossip shows. His PR team advised staying away from the media for at least a few more weeks. But looking at his daughter's expectant face, he realized they couldn't simply hide indefinitely. They couldn't allow fear or the opinions of others to dictate their lives. What if we brought the coach here? He suggested. The pool isn't Olympic-sized, but it's big enough for practice. We can adapt equipment, whatever is needed. The girl's eyes lit up. Would that be possible? Of course, he replied with the confidence of someone who'd spent his life turning ideas into reality. In fact, why stop at the coach? We could bring in everything you need. Specialized equipment, maybe even other swimmers to train with you. The aunt raised an eyebrow, simultaneously impressed and concerned by the scale of the proposal. Don't you think that would be a little over the top? The millionaire recognized the familiar pattern, his tendency to solve problems with large-scale resources, to approach personal challenges with the same mindset he applied to business. It was the first time in weeks that he felt on familiar, comfortable ground. Maybe, he conceded. What would you suggest? The aunt pondered for a moment. What if we started just with the coach and the essential equipment? If that works well, we can expand gradually. The reasonableness of the approach impressed him. It was the kind of incremental thinking that was often lacking in his professional life, dominated by grand gestures and game-changing decisions. A sensible approach, he agreed. We'll start that way. The next day, as the first pieces of training equipment arrived and the coach settled into one of the property's guest rooms, the millionaire received a call he couldn't ignore. His personal attorney, with news about the formal paternity acknowledgement process. The news is mixed, the man informed him. The good news is that, with the DNA test and your willingness to assume paternity, the legal aspect is relatively straightforward. The complicated part? The company board, the millionaire finished. Exactly. They're legally challenging your ability to make corporate decisions under emotional distress. And there's a faction looking to use this as an opportunity for a permanent change in leadership. The millionaire realized the corporate betrayal was even deeper than he'd initially imagined. People he'd trusted to build his empire were now seeking to oust him, using his own daughter as a pretext. How much time do we have? 2 weeks until the next board meeting. They're going to vote on a motion of no confidence. Understood. Keep me informed of any developments. Hi! He ended the call and returned to the pool area, where the girl was already training under the attentive supervision of the coach. He watched her glide through the water with that natural grace that always impressed him, and he felt a clarity of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. He wouldn't let them take away the company he'd built, but more importantly, he wouldn't allow any corporate battle to interfere with his newfound relationship with his daughter. That night, after dinner, the girl found him on the deck, gazing at the ocean as if searching for answers in the waves crashing on the beach. "We're causing problems for you, aren't we?" she asked, getting straight to the point as always. "You're never a problem," he replied sincerely. "It's the adults who complicate things with agendas, ambitions and fears." She nodded, processing the information. "My aunt says we should never run away from problems, but face them head on." "Your aunt is a very wise woman. Then why are we hiding here instead of facing the world out there?" The question, so simple and direct, struck him like a bolt of clarity. She was right, of course. They were hiding, allowing others to control the narrative, to define the terms of the conflict. "You're right," he acknowledged after a long moment. "We're reacting when we should be acting." That conversation, so brief and simple, crystallized something that had been forming in his mind over the past few days. A strategy not just to protect his position in the company or his relationship with his daughter, but to transform the entire situation into something positive. The next morning, he convened an informal meeting in the living room of the beach house. The aunt, the girl, the coach, his personal attorney, who had traveled especially for the meeting, and his ex-wife, who had arrived the night before after accepting his invitation to meet the girl. "I have a plan," he announced, "but it will only work if everyone agrees, especially you," he added, looking directly at his daughter. In the following minutes, he outlined his vision. They wouldn't hide anymore. Instead, they would hold a controlled press conference. They would present the facts on their own terms, and more importantly, they would announce an initiative that would transform the personal narrative into something larger, the creation of a foundation dedicated to children with physical disabilities, with a special focus on adaptive technologies and Paralympic sports. "We'll use half of my personal resources to fund this," he explained, "not company funds, to avoid questions about conflicts of interest. And I want you," he turned to the aunt, "to be the executive director. No one understands the needs of these children better than you." The aunt looked momentarily stunned by the proposal. "Me? But I don't have any experience running a foundation." "You have life experience, which is worth infinitely more," he replied, "and you'll have all the professional support you need." He then turned to his ex-wife, who was watching silently. "And I would like you to serve on the board, in memory of our daughter." The woman nodded, her eyes moist. "She would have loved this," she said softly. Finally, he addressed the girl, who had been following everything with solemn attention. "And as for you, if you agree, you would be the public face of the foundation, an inspiration to other children. But," he added seriously, "only if it's something you really want. The choice is completely yours." The girl was silent for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. Finally, with the same directness that characterized her, she asked, "Will this get in the way of my training for competitions?" The millionaire couldn't contain a smile. "On the contrary, the foundation will support your training and that of many other athletes." She nodded, satisfied. "Then I agree, but with one condition." "What?" he asked, curious. "That you promise you're not just doing this to get your company back." The perspicacity of the question caught him off guard. He looked at that child, his daughter, with renewed admiration. Even so young, she saw clearly the complexities of adult motives. "I promise," he replied with absolute sincerity. "The company is important, but it's not the most important thing. You are." Those simple words seemed to seal something between them, a pact of honesty and shared priorities. "So, when do we start?" she asked, practical as always. "Right now," the millionaire replied, feeling more alive than he had in years. The conference room of the city's most prestigious hotel was packed. Journalists from national and international news outlets, cameras strategically positioned, executives from the Millionaire's company, figures from the sports world, representatives from disability advocacy organizations, all waited anxiously for the press conference announced with only 24 hours' notice. Backstage, the millionaire adjusted his tie for the third time. It wasn't nervousness related to the press. He'd faced countless press conferences throughout his career. It was the awareness of what he was about to do, of the life he was about to publicly embrace, of the commitment he would make before the entire world. The aunt approached, discreetly adjusting the brooch that held her scarf in place, clearly uncomfortable in the formal clothes she rarely wore. "She's ready," she informed him, a little nervous but determined as always. The millionaire nodded. "Are you sure she wants to do this? We can still change our minds." The aunt smiled understandingly. "It's not like you to offer a last-minute out." "I'm not worried about myself," he replied. "I'm worried about her, about the exposure, about the scrutiny that will come. She's stronger than she looks," the aunt assured him. "Besides," she added with a meaningful smile, "she's your daughter. Resilience is in her blood." Those simple words brought surprising comfort. Yes, she was his daughter, something that, even after weeks of adjusting to the idea, still amazed him occasionally with its profound reality. The girl appeared then, accompanied by his ex-wife, who was affectionately adjusting the collar of her simple but elegant dress. The two had developed a surprisingly quick connection in the few days they'd spent together. "Do I look okay?" the girl asked, doing a small twirl to show off her full outfit. "Perfect," replied the millionaire, emotion evident in his voice. The press aides gave the signal. It was time. The millionaire took a deep breath, exchanged one last meaningful look with his daughter, and entered the conference room. The murmur ceased immediately as he took the stage. Camera flashes fired, in sequence creating a brief storm of lights. He positioned himself at the microphone, his impeccable posture contrasting with the unusual vulnerability in his eyes. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice firm and controlled. "Thank you for being here this morning. We are here to announce not only a new initiative, but a new direction in my personal and professional life." He paused deliberately, scanning the room. "A few weeks ago, I discovered something that completely changed my perspective. I discovered that I have a daughter I didn't know about, an extraordinary young woman who, by a twist of fate, I reconnected with without knowing that we shared blood ties." A murmur ran through the room. Even those who already knew the story through the tabloids didn't expect such a direct and immediate admission. The circumstances of this reunion and discovery are complex and private. What matters is that after incontestable scientific confirmation, I officially and with immense pride assume the paternity of this child. He paused again, letting the information sink in. The camera flashes intensified. This revelation has brought perspectives I was lacking. For years, after the tragic loss of my other daughter, I immersed myself exclusively in work, creating technologies and expanding businesses, but losing sight of what really matters. This reunion has reminded me that my greatest legacy will not be patents or fortunes, but the impact I can have on the lives of others. His eyes sought out those of the chairman of his company's board, sitting in the front row with a tense expression. Therefore, in addition to officially reassuming my duties as CEO, with the support of the majority of shareholders, I might add, I'm announcing today the creation of the New Hope Foundation, an initiative that will initially invest $5 billion in the development of adaptive technologies and support programs for children with physical disabilities, with a special focus on Paralympic sports. The announcement of the amount provoked audible reactions of surprise. It was one of the largest private donations in history for a specific cause. This is not just a financial commitment, but a personal one. Half of my personal fortune will be gradually transferred to this foundation. And to demonstrate that this is a lifelong project and not just a public relations stunt, I would like to introduce you to the executive director of the foundation. He gestured, and the girl's aunt stepped onto the stage. Dressed with simple elegance, her face bore a combination of nervousness and determination. For more than a decade, this extraordinary woman single-handedly raised a child with special needs, working multiple jobs, facing prejudice, overcoming obstacles that most of us can't even imagine. There is no one more qualified to lead a foundation dedicated to these children than someone who has lived every challenge firsthand. The aunt positioned herself next to him, accepting the microphone with a brief thank you, and then presented her vision for the foundation. Community programs, research in adaptive technology, scholarships for Paralympic athletes, support for families. As she spoke, the millionaire observed the reactions in the room. The initial shock had been replaced by genuine interest. Even the most cynical faces, veteran journalists, competitive executives, showed signs of engagement with the proposal. Presented. After the aunt's concise and moving speech, he retook the microphone. "And now," he said, his voice slightly choked for the first time since the beginning of the conference, "I would like to introduce someone very special, the inspiration for this foundation, my daughter." A reverent silence filled the room as the girl entered, walking with that determined grace that always impressed him. She wore a simple but elegant outfit, and her face displayed a surprising composure for someone so young, exposed to so many gazes. Without assistance, she positioned herself before the microphone adjusted to her height, and with her feet skillfully supported on a small platform, she leaned slightly to speak. "Hello," she began, her voice clear and firm. "My name doesn't matter. What matters is what I represent. I am one of millions of children who were born different, who face challenges that others don't face, who need to find their own paths." The simplicity and confidence of her words immediately captured the attention of the audience. "I was born without arms, but I've never considered myself incomplete. My aunt taught me that our differences don't define us, our actions do. That's why I use my feet to do everything I need: write, eat, swim, even sell candy on the streets, like I did before I met my dad." Her gaze met the millionaire's for a brief moment, a subtle smile passing between them. "Now I know that I have the opportunity to do more than just live my life. I can help other kids like me find their paths. We don't want pity. We don't want to be treated as special. We want opportunities, chances to show what we're capable of." A veteran journalist known for his skepticism raised his hand. The press aide hesitated, but the girl nodded, giving him the floor. "Isn't it strange to discover that your father is one of the wealthiest men in the country?" he asked directly. "How does it feel knowing you could have had a completely different life?" The millionaire visibly tensed, ready to intervene, but the girl replied without hesitation, "The life I had made me who I am. I grew up with an aunt who taught me the value of hard work and dignity. I learned to never give up, even when everything seemed impossible. If I had grown up in a mansion with everything money can buy—" She paused thoughtfully. "Maybe I wouldn't." Be the person I am today, and I like who I've become." The response, so mature and thoughtful, provoked an admired silence, followed by a spontaneous wave of applause. "What we are creating today," she continued when the silence returned, "is not about the past that could have been. It's about the future we can build together. A future where children like me don't have to sell candy on the streets to feel useful. Where our talents are seen, not our limitations." She concluded her speech with a moving simplicity. "I'm not just the daughter of a rich man. I'm my own person, and I intend to use this new platform to make a difference." The impact of her words was immediate and visible. Journalists who had arrived ready for a public relations spectacle were now visibly touched. Some discreetly wiped away tears. Others furiously scribbled notes, knowing they were witnessing something genuinely significant. The millionaire approached the microphone again for the final words. "This isn't a story about personal redemption, although there is certainly that. It's not about cleaning up my image or protecting my businesses. It's about recognizing that all of us, regardless of our circumstances, have the opportunity to create an impact bigger than ourselves." He paused, then concluded with contained emotion. "I've spent decades creating technologies that change the way we live. Now, I want to dedicate the rest of my life to changing the way we include, the way we welcome, the way we see each other. This is the greatest innovation I can offer the world." When the press conference officially ended, journalists crowded around, asking additional questions, seeking details about the foundation, about the next steps of the newly formed family. The millionaire noticed that his CFO was talking animatedly, with the president of the Paralympic Federation already discussing potential partnerships. His ex-wife had approached the aunt, the two women sharing a moment of connection about the girl who now united their lives in unexpected ways. In the middle of that whirlwind, he met his daughter's gaze. She remained firm, but he could see the slight tremor in her lips, the tension finally beginning to manifest after the intense exposure. With a discreet gesture for security to clear a path, he approached her. "You were extraordinary," he said, kneeling to get to her eye level, "more courageous and articulate than I could ever be." "Did I do okay?" she asked, and for the first time that day he saw the child behind the impressive composure, a girl who, despite everything, was still seeking approval. "More than okay," he assured her. "You changed the narrative completely. It's no longer about scandal or secrets. It's about possibilities, about the future." She smiled, visibly relaxing. "Can I go swimming now? The coach said we can use the hotel pool so I don't miss a day of practice." The millionaire laughed, that genuine laugh that had become increasingly frequent since she'd entered his life. "Of course, the state meet is in 2 weeks, right? We need to stay focused." As the aunt accompanied her to change, the chairman of his company's board approached. "A brilliant move," the man commented, extending his hand. "The market is already reacting. The stock is up 7% just during this press conference." The millionaire shook the offered hand, but his smile had a touch of irony. "That's a collateral benefit, not the objective." The man studied him for a moment, as if trying to determine the sincerity of the statement. "You really have changed," he concluded finally. "Weeks ago, the stock price would have been your only concern. I have a different metric of success now," the millionaire replied simply. As he headed to the locker rooms to find his daughter, he reflected on the truth of that statement. His world, once measured in market capitalization and profit margins, now revolved around things impossible to quantify. The girl's proud smile when mastering a new swimming technique, the growing confidence in her gaze, the opportunity to witness her development. In the hotel pool, he watched her glide through the water with that natural grace that always impressed him. The journalists had been cleared away. That moment was private, just for the family. The aunt sat down beside him on the edge of the pool, the two in contemplative silence for a few minutes. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked finally. "Exposing her this way to the world?" The millionaire reflected for a moment. "I believe so. The world would see her anyway, with or without our control of the narrative. This way, at least, she actively participates in the construction of her own story." The aunt nodded understandingly. "She's never been afraid of the spotlight. Even when she was selling candy on the streets, she had a presence that drew attention." "Like you," he observed. "Your confidence today on stage, it seemed like you'd done it your whole life." She smiled, a shy smile that revealed how meaningful that compliment was. "I just said what I believe, what I've lived." They were silent again, watching the girl complete another lap in the pool with impressive strength and determination. "You know what impresses me most about her?" the millionaire commented. "It's not just the physical overcoming, which is obviously extraordinary. It's her ability to see beyond appearances, to find the essential in every situation." "She's always been that way," the aunt confirmed. "Even in the toughest times, she had this clarity, this ability to separate what matters from the noise." The millionaire smiled, recognizing the truth in that observation. "It's exactly what I needed in my life, someone to remind me of what really matters." At that moment, the girl finished another lap, and noticing them at the edge of the pool, swam toward them. "Did you see that?" she asked, breathless with pride. 5 seconds faster than my best time." "We did," they replied in unison, their faces lit by a pride that transcended conventional family ties. Watching that scene, the girl radiant in the water, the aunt smiling with pride, himself experiencing a fullness he'd thought lost forever. The millionaire knew, with a certainty he'd rarely found even in the most calculated business decisions, that he was finally on the right path. 6 months had passed since the historic press conference. The millionaire's mansion, once an empty and cold space despite all its opulence, now vibrated with a different energy. The room that had belonged to his first daughter, kept untouched as a shrine for years, had finally been opened and transformed into a luminous space where photos of the two sisters, the one who had passed away and the one who had arrived, shared space on the walls, creating a continuity that brought comfort instead of pain. The aunt occupied an adjacent wing of the property, maintaining her independence while actively participating in the new family configuration. As executive director of the New Hope Foundation, she divided her time between her new professional responsibilities and the attentive care of her niece, now officially recognized as the millionaire's daughter. The adaptation hadn't been perfect or instantaneous. There had been moments of tension, necessary adjustments, difficult conversations about expectations and boundaries. The millionaire, used to commanding corporate empires, had needed to learn the subtle art of co-parenting, respecting the deep bond between aunt and niece, built over years of complicity and joint overcoming. On that sunny Sunday morning, the extended family, including the ex-wife, who had become a frequent and welcome presence, gathered in the garden for a celebratory brunch. At the center of the table, next to the cake decorated with aquatic motifs, rested a gold medal from the state adaptive swimming competition won the previous week. "I still can't believe I broke the state record," commented the girl, who savored a generous slice of cake with her feet, a skill that no longer surprised anyone in that inner circle. "I believe it," replied the millionaire, the pride evident in his voice. "Your determination in training, I've never seen anything like it. Determination and talent," added the ex-wife with a warm smile. "Don't forget the natural talent." "Speaking of natural talent," intervened the aunt discreetly, consulting her tablet, "I just received a message from the Paralympic Federation. They want to include her in the development program for Paris 2028. A surprise silence fell over the table, followed by exclamations of joy. Paris 2028 meant that the girl, then a few years older, could compete in the Paralympics, representing the country at the highest competitive level. "Are you serious?" asked the girl, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Isn't it too early? I'm still an exceptional athlete," completed the coach, who had joined the lunch as part of the extended family that had formed. The program is precisely to identify and develop early talents. It doesn't mean you'll compete immediately, but that you'll receive specific, long-term preparation. The girl absorbed the information, her face oscillating between excitement and a shadow of worry. "Does that mean more training? Less time for other things?" The millionaire and the aunt exchanged meaningful glances. Both had discussed extensively the importance of allowing her to have a balanced childhood, despite her extraordinary talent. "It means more opportunities," replied the aunt cautiously. "But you will decide the pace, the involvement. Nothing will be forced." "Exactly," agreed the millionaire. "Paris 2028 is a possibility, not an obligation. What matters is that you are happy in the process, not just when reaching a distant goal." The wisdom of those words, so far removed from the relentless perfectionism that had characterized his professional life for decades, surprised even himself. He had discovered, through that extraordinary child, a capacity for balance and perspective that he had never found in board meetings or strategic planning sessions. "And if I wanted to?" The girl hesitated, as if testing a new and potentially controversial idea. "And if I wanted to try other things besides swimming, like art or music or, I don't know, astronomy, then we would explore those possibilities." "With the same enthusiasm," replied the millionaire without hesitation. "Your worth will never be limited to your achievements in a single area." That statement hung in the air like a revelation. For someone who had spent his adult life defining himself exclusively by his professional achievements, publicly recognizing that his daughter's worth transcended any metric of conventional success, represented a profound evolution. "Speaking of exploring possibilities," intervened the millionaire's personal assistant, approaching discreetly with a sealed envelope. "This just arrived from the court." The millionaire opened the envelope, quickly read the contents, and a wide smile lit up his face. "It's official," he announced, his voice slightly choked. "The joint adoption has been approved." The aunt put her hands to her face, visibly moved. The legal solution they had found, after months of debates and careful planning, was as innovative as it was meaningful. A joint adoption that legally recognized both the biological bond with the father and the bond of creation with the aunt, guaranteeing the girl the security of officially belonging to both. "Does that mean I have two legal guardians now?" asked the girl, processing the information. "It means that the law finally recognizes what we already knew," replied the millionaire. "That families are formed in many different ways, and yours has the best of both worlds." The ex-wife raised her glass in a spontaneous toast to the most extraordinary unconventional family I've ever known. Everyone joined in the toast, including the personal chef and other house staff who, over the months, had been integrated into the new family dynamic with an informality that would have been unthinkable in the millionaire's old life. Later, as the adults chatted on the deck, the girl called her dad for a walk through the expansive garden surrounding the property. They walked side by side, she with her characteristic grace, he unconsciously adjusting his steps to keep up with her. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally, after a few minutes of comfortable silence. "Anything," he replied genuinely. "Are you happy? Really?" The question, so direct and profound, was typical of her. The millionaire stopped walking, considering his response with the seriousness the question deserved. "Yes," he replied finally. "Not in the way I imagined it would be, Not in the way I pursued for decades, but in a more complete, more true way. She nodded, processing the response. Before we met, you looked so sad that day on the sidewalk, even being so rich, so powerful. I was empty, he admitted. I had built an empire, but lost my humanity in the process. And then, he paused, searching for the right words. And then I found you. I saw your strength, your joy, despite all the challenges. I saw how you faced the world with dignity and hope. I was alone too, she confessed. Even having my aunt, who I love more than anything, there was a space I didn't know how to explain. They continued walking, reaching a small ornamental pond where ducks swam placidly in the golden afternoon. You know what I learned from you? Asked the millionaire, watching a duckling trying to keep up with its mother in the water. What? That our greatest limitations are never physical, they're mental. They're the walls we build around our hearts, the fortresses we erect thinking we're protecting ourselves, when in reality we're just isolating ourselves. The girl smiled, that luminous smile that had the power to transform any environment. And I learned from you that it's never too late to start over, to find a new way to see the world. The millionaire felt an intense emotion overwhelm his chest. Not the heartbreaking pain of grief that had accompanied him for years, but a warm fullness that seemed to expand with each breath. Thank you, he said simply. For what? She asked, genuinely curious. For teaching me how to live again, for showing me that even without arms, you managed to embrace life more strongly than I ever could with all my resources. She laughed, that crystal-clear laughter that had become the most precious soundtrack of his days. That's a good slogan for the foundation, she joked. We should write it down. They laughed together, that natural complicity that defied the relatively short time they'd known each other. It was as if their souls recognized each other on a level that transcended circumstances or timelines. Back at the house, they found the aunt and the ex-wife in deep conversation about the next steps of the foundation. The project that had started as a public relations strategy had transformed into a genuine mission, already impacting hundreds of families through community programs, technological research, and sports initiatives. We were discussing the possibility of expanding to 10 new centers next year, explained the aunt, her eyes shining with that enthusiasm that the millionaire had learned to admire deeply. The impact would be exponential. Let's do 20, he replied without hesitation. And let's include a specific program to identify Paralympic talents in underserved communities. The ex-wife smiled, recognizing in that impulsive generosity the man she had fallen in love with decades ago, before corporate ambition had transformed him into someone almost unrecognizable. Something incredible is happening here, she commented softly. Something bigger than all of us. That night after dinner, the girl surprised everyone with an unexpected announcement. I want to tell my story, she declared, not just for interviews or reports. I want to write a book for other kids like me. The millionaire exchanged glances, with the aunt both simultaneously protective and respectful of the girl's growing autonomy. Are you sure? He asked. That would mean exposing your personal life even more. I am, she replied with that quiet certainty that characterized her. When I was alone on the streets, selling candy, I wanted so badly to find stories of people like me. People who didn't have arms, but had a voice. Who didn't have what others consider essential, but had essence. The profound simplicity of that reflection silenced everyone. It was the pure wisdom of someone who, despite her young age, had lived enough to understand truths that many adults would never reach. Then we'll make it happen, promised the millionaire. We'll find the best way to share your story with the world. Later, after the girl went to sleep, he remained on the deck, contemplating the starry sky with a glass of red wine. The aunt joined him, wrapped in a light shawl against the night breeze. She continues to surprise me, she commented, a serene smile on her tired but satisfied face. Me too, he agreed, every day. They were silent for a few moments, that quiet complicity that they had developed, united by the shared love for the girl who had transformed their lives. You know what I think sometimes? Said the aunt finally. That maybe it's not her who needs us, maybe it's us who need her. The millionaire nodded, recognizing the profound truth in that observation. She saved me, he admitted, his voice low but firm. The day I met her on that sidewalk, I thought I was helping a child in need. In reality, she was rescuing me from an empty existence. Life has those ironies, reflected the aunt. I spent years wondering why my sister abandoned such a special child, why you never answered her letters, why we had to fight so hard. And now I realize that every step of that tortuous path brought us exactly to where we should be. The millionaire contemplated that extraordinary woman who, through sacrifice and unconditional love, had raised the daughter he hadn't known. Instead of resentment, he had found in her a partner in the most important journey of his life. Thank you, he said simply, for being the mother she needed when I couldn't be the father I should have been. And the aunt smiled, her eyes shining in the moonlight. And thank you for showing up when you did, for seeing in her what I always saw. The next morning, the family routine followed its course. The girl with her morning training in the pool, the millionaire balancing corporate commitments with his new family priority, the aunt coordinating the foundation's projects, occasionally assisted by the ex-wife, whose experience in managing non-profits had proved invaluable. The press remained interested in the unusual family configuration, but the initial frenzy had given way to a cautious respect, especially as the concrete results of the New Hope Foundation began to appear. Children with diverse disabilities, discovering talents in adaptive sports, families receiving practical and emotional support, research in adaptive technology advancing with the generous funding made available. On a quiet afternoon, while watching his daughter perfect her swimming techniques under the attentive guidance of the coach, the millionaire received a notification on his phone. The stock price of his company had reached a new all-time high. Ironically, his family distraction, as some analysts had initially classified his partial withdrawal, had coincided with the conglomerate's period of greatest prosperity. He looked at the notification for a moment, recognizing its significance, but without feeling the old euphoria that such numbers used to provoke. He turned off the phone and returned his attention to the pool, where his daughter had just completed a lap with an impressive time. "Did you see that?" she shouted, radiant. With pride, "I did," he replied, smiling. "Every second." And in that crystal-clear instant, he understood with absolute clarity that true wealth had always been there. Not in the zeros in his bank account or the market capitalization of his companies, but in the ability to be present, to witness the growth of an extraordinary human being, to be part of a journey bigger than himself. The girl got out of the pool with that characteristic grace that always impressed him. Using her feet with surprising dexterity, she grabbed her towel and dried herself as she walked toward him. "The coach said, 'I'm ready for the national competition,'" she announced, her eyes shining with anticipation. "I never doubted it," he replied, feeling his chest swell with pride. Side by side, they walked back to the house where the aunt was preparing a surprise reception to celebrate the 6-month anniversary of the New Hope Foundation. The ex-wife, now a close friend, had brought an album with photos of the other daughter, which would finally be shared and celebrated, integrating past and present into a narrative of healing and continuity. At the entrance of the house, the girl stopped suddenly and turned to him. "You know what I like most about you?" she asked, with that disarming frankness that was her trademark. "What?" he inquired, genuinely curious. "That you see me," she replied simply. "You don't just see a girl without arms, you see who I am. The millionaire knelt down to get to her eye level, feeling an intense emotion that he didn't try to hide. "And you know what I love most about you?" he asked. She shook her head, waiting. "That you taught me to see again. Not just you, but everything that really matters." The girl smiled, that luminous smile that had the power to illuminate even the darkest corners of his soul. Without words, she leaned forward and touched her forehead to his, an armless hug, but filled with more love than any conventional gesture could contain. In that silent moment of connection, the man who had conquered the business world, who had accumulated more wealth than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, finally understood the most valuable lesson, that the true purpose of life was not in the achievements or the accumulated possessions, but in the bonds we create, in the lives we touch, in the ability to love and be loved. And there, at the entrance of his mansion, with the setting sun casting golden tones over the garden, the millionaire and the armless girl, father and daughter united by destiny, by biology, and above all by conscious choice, sealed a silent pact to continue this journey together, transforming limitations into possibilities, absences into presences, and losses into new beginnings. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in the millionaire's place? Comment below and share this story with someone special.